Hey guys, this is going to be the story on my second successful VBAC. So this is going to be Landon's birth story, or labor and delivery story. It all started on October 3rd. It started out like a normal day. I was just feeling miserable because I was huge. I was 38 weeks and 2 days at this point. So me and the kids, we had went and picked something up for lunch because I just wasn't feeling too great. But it was just the normal, I'm really big pregnant, I don't feel like doing anything, I just need a nap type of not feeling good. So the plan was we were going to eat our lunch and then we were all going to take a nap. So around noon, we had finished eating. I went outside and I was standing on our front porch and I was sitting down in a chair and I had coughed and some fluid came out and I was like, great, I just peed myself. Fantastic. And mind you, I had never peed myself in any of my other pregnancies except for this one. But with Landon, if I would sneeze or cough too hard, I would kind of pee myself a little bit there towards the end. So I was like, great, I just peed myself. I need to go change. And I stood up and I was standing there and it just kept coming out. And I was like, okay, so this is really weird. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it was my water. My water just broke. And it was funny because my sister had just Snapchatted me and she said, when are you going to have that baby, or something along those lines. And I snapped her back. I was like, my water just broke. And she was like, no way. I was like, so way. But I did call my husband first because, of course, he has to be the first one to know. So I called him and I had told him that my water just broke and that I wasn't having contractions, so he could take his time, but he did need to start working his way home because he was at work. And then I sent the snap back to my sister. And then I went inside and I changed out of those shorts and I changed my undies and put on new pants. Actually, no, I was just wearing underwear and I put a pad in it. And I just wore that for a minute. Yeah. So I was just kind of like thinking, and your mind starts racing and what do I need to do? I need to do this and this and this. And so anyways, I had gotten all the kids' bags packed prior to this just so they would be ready. So I just threw the last minute things in the bags and I called my mom and I said my water just broke, and because she was going to be watching the kids while we were in the hospital. So she was like, okay, do you want me to come to your house or do you want to meet me at Bam and Papa's house? And I was like, well, why don't you just meet us at Bam and Papa's house? That way the boys can play over there for a little bit before, nighttime, and then you guys can either stay the night there or you guys can come back to my house to sleep, whatever works for you. So I got all the kids loaded up into my car and we drove to my grandparents' house, and from there I just waited for my husband to get there and then we were going to go to the hospital together. So while we were at my grandparents' house, I was kind of just trying to walk around and trying to get my contractions started. And it had been like 45 minutes since my water had broken and I hadn't had even cramping really, which with my other ones, it took a while for the contractions to start, but they did start. And with this one, I just wasn't feeling crampy or contracting-ish or anything. I was like taking my time because obviously I don't like to go to the hospital when I'm not contracting. If you haven't heard my C-section labor and delivery story, go ahead and check that one out and you'll see why I don't like to go to the hospital when I'm not contracting. Anyways, long story short, I just don't like to go to the hospital whenever I'm not contracting because I feel like they're just going to push Pitocin on me, and that's something that I like to avoid if possible. So about an hour and a half, 2 hours rolls by. My husband's finally there, still not really having any contractions. I was starting to get a little crampy, but they weren't like contractions, So I was like, whatever, let's just go ahead and go to the hospital. Might as well just get all settled in and stuff like that and check in with the midwife and stuff like that. So I kissed my babies and I told them that next time I saw them, I would have their baby brother. And Daniel was real excited. Cade had no clue what was going on. He didn't know what I was talking about. So we went to the hospital. We went to triage first, and of course it was my water, so they sent us up to labor and delivery. And they started my, they did put an IV thing in my arm, but they didn't hook me up to anything at this point. So they were just watching to see if I was going to have contractions, and I was walking the halls a lot. And then from 5 o'clock, my sister showed up at the hospital. I still wasn't really having contractions. I had seen the midwife, and she was like suggesting different things that I could try, and that's where we left it. So at about 7 o'clock, she came back in, and she was like, okay, so let's try nipple stimulation. And I was like, okay, well, that's really weird. Are you going to bring in a breast pump? Because that's how I've always thought you did nipple stimulation. And she was like, no, you're going to do it, because it works a lot better. And I was like, okay, well, here goes nothing. So I was doing some nipple stimulation, and I had some contractions coming on. They were pretty strong, and I was like, it's really working. Like, I was just like, ugh. I felt really awkward doing it, but whatever. You're in labor, so you can't really get embarrassed about anything. So I start having contractions, and they were pretty consistent. They were about 10 minutes apart probably, but they were pretty strong. And she was like, okay, well, we just need to get them closer together, so let's talk about Pitocin. And I was like, well, okay. So we talked it over, and we decided that we were going to start at the lowest, just like we did with Cade, and go from there. So I was at a 2 on Pitocin, and things were getting more regular. At some point, okay, I was trying to go natural. I'll just put that out there right now, because I was so focused on the contractions and writing them out and stuff like that that I didn't really pay attention to the time. I do know that at around 8 or 9, I was a 5. Yeah, I was a 5. And then around midnight, my sister asked, can Dad come up? And I was like, no, let's just wait. At some point or another, my aunt and my cousin Serena showed up. She brought me a huge bag of Sonic Mints, because those are just my favorites. And I was still going natural, and so I don't really remember what time it was or anything like that. And so they were only there for a little bit, and so they left, and my midwife came in, and I was in so much pain, but I was doing good. I was breathing through them, and I was so, so proud of myself. With Daniel, I had gotten to a 6. I was a 5-6 when I got the epidural with Daniel, and with Cade, I was a 3-4 when I got the epidural. And so I knew that I was at a 5, and I was just going, and I was so proud of myself. So my midwife comes in, and they were hurting really bad, and she got me up out of the bed. She dangled me over my husband's shoulders, and she grabbed my hips, and she was swaying them. She was amazing. She pulled out the labor bar that they attached to the bed, and she let me dangle from that. At one point, I was in the fetal position on the floor, because I was just trying to do something to make it not so painful. I was trying to find a good position to where I could just ride them out. And finally, it got to where I was losing control of my breathing, and then the thought of actually having to push a child out of my hoo-hoo when I could very much feel it, that started getting to me. And so I asked to be checked, but before I would let them check me, I said, what is the, like, how far can I go and still get the epidural? And she was like, well, if I can see that you're progressing fast and you're like 7, 8, then we're just gonna have a baby. And so I was like, okay. So I was at a 5 the last time they checked me, and so I was like, okay, go ahead and check me. They checked me and I was at a 7, and he was moving down really well. I remember that every time she checked me, she had to go in and pull my cervix forward, and that hurt so bad. And every time she did that, I would have like a 5-minute long contraction. Not even kidding. It was so painful. So she was like, you're at a 7, and I was like, okay, I might want the epidural. And she was like, well, are you sure? You're so close. We could just have this baby. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't want to feel what's about to happen down there. And so she was like, okay, we'll just think it over for 30 more minutes, and then we'll come back in and check you, and then we will call for the anesthesiologist if you still want it. And I was like, okay. So I was just like, at this point, I wasn't even able to breathe through the contractions. I was crying, and I was hyperventilating, and it was horrible. But I was so proud because I had gotten so far. So she comes back in 30 minutes later, and she checks me, and she's like, okay, you're still at a 7, so it's not happening too fast, and if you want the epidural, then that's fine. And I was like, yes, please give me this juice. I need the juice. And she called for the anesthesiologist, and whenever he walked in, I cried. I was like, thank God you're here. I have been waiting for you. I was just so excited to see this guy that had the giant needle for my back. He puts it in, and I think that was the most painful epidural that I've ever gotten, but I've never felt them before because I was in so much pain when I got them that I wasn't able to feel them. This time I think it was more so uncomfortable because I was having such strong contractions, and they had me bend over, so it was just more painful in my back. But I couldn't actually feel the actual needle going in my back. So I get the epidural, and I tell my sister, go ahead, and tell Dad to go ahead and come up here. And before we know it, it was 2:30, and they had checked me, and they said, you are 9 centimeters. And at this point, my husband was asleep on the couch. And we wake up my husband, and we're like, we're at a 9. We're going to start pushing here really soon. You need to go ahead and wake up. And they start coming in with all of their equipment and stuff. They turn on the warmer, and it is just about to happen. Just after 3 o'clock in the morning, little Landon made his appearance. They put him up on my chest first off, and that was amazing. The first thing that I said whenever I saw him was, he is so tiny. And I thought for sure he was going to be in the 5-pound range. For some reason, I was just like, there's no way he's big enough. Like, he's too small. And they're like, he's fine, he's beautiful, he's fine. And I was like, okay. And so I was just snuggling him, and then one of the baby nurses was right here watching him breathe and stuff like that, and they were like, he's having some his chest is deflating too much whenever he's trying to breathe, so we need to take him over to the warmers to get the stuff out of his lungs. And I was like, okay. And then the whole time I was just watching him. I wasn't even paying attention to what was going on downstairs. But then eventually I did look down because she was like, okay, you're going to start, or now it's time to deliver the placenta, which is weird because I had never, like, it just like kind of came out, I guess, before. And so this time she was like, okay, I need you to kind of tense up a little bit. Like, I didn't actually push Landon out. I just kind of like bent forward, and he slowly made his way out, actually pretty fast, really. And so she had me do that again, and the placenta was delivered. And I was like, did you already stitch me up? And she was like, you didn't need any stitches. And I was like, what? You can do this and not need stitches? Like, what? Like, I was just blown away. That was just crazy to me. They were still over there working on Landon, getting him to breathe right, and Kagan was over there, my dad was over there, and I knew that he was in good hands. And I guess to distract me, the midwife was like, did you want to see, because I had a circumambulate placenta, and so she was like, did you want to see the part that makes it circumambulate? And I was like, sure. So she brings me my placenta in this bowl, and she was like, this ridge right here is why, that's what makes it a circumvallate, and this is the sac that he was in whenever he was inside of you, and this is how he was attached to you. She was just showing me everything, and I was like, that is so cool. I actually have a picture of my placenta, which I find pretty cool. I did want to do a placental encapsulation, but me and my husband decided against it this time around, but hopefully next time I'll be able to do that, because I do have a history of having postpartum depression, so I just thought that it would be a nice thing to have. Luckily, I didn't get it with Landon, though. So we stayed in the hospital for 2 days. My legs were numb for about 6 hours after that, and I remember going pee for the first time. I was always so scared to do this after having a baby, but I sat down and I was still so numb that like I could hear myself peeing, and I was like, am I peeing? And the nurse was like, yeah, you're doing it. And I was like, yes, I'm peeing, and I don't even feel it. This is awesome. But then once the numbing went away from the epidural, it was fine. I was a little sore, or not sore, I was a little swollen. It wasn't sore at all. There was no anything. Like, it was just swollen. That's, like, it was the best. Like, that was the best recovery ever. It was swollen for about 2 days, 2 or 3 days, and then it was fine. Like, I never had any problems with it at all. Didn't have to use the spray, didn't have to use the cooling pads, didn't have to use an ice pack, like nothing. It was amazing. It was my most successful attempt at a natural birth, and it was my easiest recovery by far. So I was really happy with the way everything went, and from there, we left at just over 24 hours, because they had to do the newborn screening test at 24 hours, and they also had to wait until he was over 24 hours to circumcise him, and then we left that afternoon, evening. So it was just over 24 hours. It was like a day and a half. And it was perfect. And then the rest of the story, actually, from there on out, you can hear about it in our PKU, our son's diagnosis video. It goes from where I'm stopping now on to after we found out about the diagnosis. So that's all that I have to say on my labor and delivery with Landon. Like I said, easiest recovery by far. I didn't know that a recovery could go that smoothly after having a baby, and it was my most fulfilling labor because I did get so far, and I was so proud of myself for doing what I did. And yeah, so like this video if you did. Comment any questions that you have down below. I love hearing from you guys, and I'll always get back to you. We are almost at 60 subscribers. Once we get to 100 subscribers, we're going to do the My Husband Does My Makeup challenge, which is going to be great. You're not going to want to miss it. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.